this sort of happened while I was away. So I had to play catch up and figure out, one, what this is, and then two, make an assessment, an initial assessment. It's subject to change, but somehow I don't think it's going to change very much, my initial assessment. You might be wondering, what am I referring to? There's a social media movement called 1776 Restoration Movement. And basically, from what I can assess, it's a group of white men who want to go back to 1776 and the constitutional principles that this nation was founded on. Now, we all know that in 1776, no one but white property owning men had any rights in this country. So it would kind of make sense that a certain group of white men want to restore 1776 at the expense of everyone else in the country. That would kind of make sense. But then there's another principle of this whole 1776 restoration movement. It fuses patriotism. And it got me thinking, what truly is a patriot? You know, nowadays the term has sort of kind of been usurped to the point of trivialness and almost meaninglessness. If you have a big Tacoma Ford F-150 pickup truck with two big, huge American flags, you can declare yourself unilaterally a patriot, in regards of whatever crazy things, views, beliefs, notions you might hold. The individual who went to Buffalo and entered the grocery store and murdered all of those African American senior citizens. He declared himself a patriot too. So we have to be really careful about who just picks up the moniker. And that's why I really don't necessarily fuck with 1776 restoration movement. Just can't do it. The initial problem is there's too many people who are racist in the movement. And I mean that sincerely. Conservatives will say, well, wait a minute. There's no way to vet out who's a racist, who's not. But yes, there is. If people have done racist things, have espoused racist views, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's more than likely a duck. I'm just saying. So, I don't like the disingenuousness coming from certain members of the 1776 Restoration Movement who say it's impossible to root out racist people in our movement. We're a movement of all Americans. Well, if you have racist people in your movement, you can't be for all Americans. Because by default, they don't want every American in their movement. So that's my first issue, the racism. The second one, can you guess? The misogyny. If you look at all of the leadership apparatus of the 1776 Restoration Movement, it's all men. There's no women of color. There's no LGBTQIA individuals. There's no representation besides one group of individuals, white men. Now, they say that they want to restore 1776. And they're the ones to do it. And my question is, what's wrong with the people we currently have as elected representatives? No, for real, I'm asking this question. Because the vast majority of mayors in this country, the vast majority of township managers in this country, the vast majority of state legislators in this country, the vast majority of House members in this country, the vast majority of senators in this country, and the overwhelming vast majority of presidents in this country have all had one thing in common. Let's not forget judges as well. Appellate judges, federal judges, Supreme Court judges. They've all had one thing in common. The vast majority have been men. White men. So when they say 1776 Restoration Movement, you're just replacing one man with another man. That's not restoration. Because the individual you're trying to replace can say, I'm abiding by the Constitution. I'm a patriot too. Does the 1776 Restoration Movement not think that Mitt Romney is a patriot? Or is he a rhino? See, they do all these arbitrary labeling to gloss over the bigger, wider picture. The governing structure, and this is what I really want to hone in on with the 1776 Restoration Movement. The government structure in this country has always been white male dominated. To this day. So this notion that Santa, an elf, an outlaw minister, somehow they are going to be more patriotic and restore the republic to greatness, which I would argue it never has achieved because of racism, because of misogyny. It's completely delusional thinking. Does it hone with what 1776 was? Yes, indeed it does. We have to be honest. The founders of this nation were not inclusive at all. And the 1776 restoration movement is not inclusive at all either. I'm not going to have any association with an exclusive group claiming the mantra of being inclusive for all Americans. Their problem is their perception of who they view as an American, in my estimation. Nobody else is really, truly an American except for them. And that's a problem. Because we have birthright citizenship. If you're born in this country, you're an American. Even if your parents crossed the border illegally and they had you in the hospital in this country, you're an American citizen. What does the American or the 1776 restoration movement want? Well, they'll tell you that they want to be governed by the Constitution. And I always say, which one? Because it's been amended quite a number of times. Do you want to go back to the original intent? Before the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Because 1776 was before the end of slavery. It was before the genocide of the indigenous and aboriginal people. And this is mainly a conservative movement. I'm not saying that everyone in the movement is a diehard Republican or votes Republican. I'm saying this is born out of conservative ideology. And so the main people that are attracted to this movement are the QAnon types, the insurrectionists on January 6th, and the Freedom Convoy type of people. Now ask yourself, do you think those three types and groups of people have much association or anything to do with people who reside and live in West Philadelphia, the south side of Chicago, East Baltimore, Flint, Michigan? Because when you talk about making the country great and restoring the country, you can't just do that with one small group of individuals. And that's why the 1776 restoration movement has now begun to kick out some of its longtime members. And even people who were behind the formation of the movement have abandoned ship and seen the light. They're like, this is not going to work. Now, they might have various different reasons besides the reasons I just mentioned for why it's not going to work. But some of the reasons they have tap very nicely with the reasons I just gave you. And what has the 1776 Restoration Movement done to those individuals? Well, they've begun to terrorize them, stalk them, serve them restraining orders. Now, one of the key principles that I somewhat agree with them on, to a certain extent, is freedom of speech. We in this country do not have any social media platform really that provides First Amendment guaranteed freedom of speech. We don't. This is a fact. But a lot of the reasons that is the case is because people come onto the internet and want to commit crimes. You can't threaten bodily harm to someone outside without that being a criminal offense. But how somehow individuals feel comfortable, even emboldened to do it all the time on the internet. So I agree that First Amendment constraints are an issue on the internet. But I disagree that any old individual should be able to incite violence utilizing the internet. So it's a delicate balance, so to speak. But I would argue they really don't want freedom of speech. If you're not inclusive and you're exclusive, that means you're excluding people's form of speech by not even having them there. Do you see a lot of Asian Americans at the 1776 Restoration Movement in Bunker Hill? Do you see a lot of Latino Americans at the 1776 Restoration Movement? Do you see a lot of Black Americans at the 1776 Restoration Movement? No. And there's a reason for that. They know simply that they're not welcome in their America of 1776. You will see a few women, but what's really been fascinating this summer, according to the reports I've received, is the fiercest critics of the 1776 Restoration Movement have been women. Even women that were in the movement who have left, who still believe in certain principles, constitutional principles, but just cannot fuck with the patriarchal bullshit of the leadership of the 1776 Restoration Movement. To me, it's a farce to ever assume that one group is going to have all the answers in a country of 340 million people. It's just impossible. But I will say this. If the 1776 Restoration Movement is serious about having dialogue and not name calling, because they love to do that. You know, I'm safe, at least according to them. And Pamela Denise Long, who is a Republican, conservative. The only thing me and Pamela agree on is the principle: to repair this nation, you need to do reparations for the descendants of African slaves. And they had a Twitter space on reparations, conservative speak. And the two conservatives that chose to introduce Pamela Denise Long, one of them, introducing the woman before she even spoke, labeled her a bitch. I kid you not, it's on the internet. You look it up. I never lie. I don't deceive you. I don't need to. He introduced Pamela Denise Long as a bitch. A black conservative woman. Remember, this is who they want to appeal to, supposedly. Women of color. I'm sorry, I don't think that's appealing to introduce someone, a guest on your program, as a bitch. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. So I can't fuck with the 1776 Restoration Movement in its current status and form. It's not inclusive, it's patriarchal, and it's racist as fuck. And all of these things are well known and well documented. So you don't have to take my word for it. And the entertaining factor, which is not entertaining to me, is that they're patriots. And anyone who disagrees with them is a pedophile. Now, this is straight out of the QAnon playbook. A lot of them are QAnon people. And I had a little issue with that. You notice the people who they claim to be pedophiles all happen to be black or Jewish. This is a fact. Go and listen to Mike Cargill. He's running for Congress out in California 35. He named some people who he said were Satanist possessed. Every name he gave was a black person or a Jewish person. And then he said, I'm not a racist. Sure could have fooled me, right? What are they trying to restore? Maybe they're trying to restore things that we tried to move past in our country. Maybe they'd rather go backwards than forward. You know, it's supposed to be forever forward, never backwards. But there's this nostalgia. There's this nostalgia about faded glory. We used to do things this way. And it was much simpler, much better. That's the general narrative that they paint. Of course, it was simple. When one group has everything and no one else has anything, of course the one group that has everything is going to be happier than the groups that have nothing. That's another way to look at it that they never look at it that way. I don't foresee this movement lasting very much longer. Only because when there were questions asked from members inside the movement, the censorship began. You know, their whole stick was being against pedophiles. Then some of the people started saying, look, some of the people that are inside of our convoy, on paper, they're convicted pedophiles themselves. And anybody that started asking questions or sharing this information was told to shut the fuck up. See, that's problematic. Because if your whole stick is being against pedophiles, and you have people in your convoy who on paper are convicted pedophiles, then your narrative and your stick go away. So they couldn't have that. So all of the investigative journalists who were a part of the convoy, they've kicked to the curb. They've thrown them out. They told them, you can't come to our convoy. That sounds very democratic, doesn't it? Things like the 1776 Restoration Movement are doomed to failure on arrival because they don't take into account the myriad of different experiences that Americans from all walks of life have to offer. But if they're serious about making the nation great, they'll join me in my call to repair the nation through reparations. They'll join that. But we all know that they won't. Because this is about them and not the nation. So my question is, what is a patriot? Is it someone who just declares himself a patriot? Has a big old American flag? And claims to hate pedophiles? Is that what patriotism has come to in America in 2022? Declare yourself a patriot. Wave an American flag. And say death to pedophiles. This is modern day conservative patriotism. It's dangerous, it's stupid, and it's not viable. Not because patriotism is bad. Having an American flag is bad. and disliking pedophiles. No. It's bad because there's no inclusion. It's bad because there's hypocrisy. It's bad because there's misogyny. And it's bad to not want to go forward and always look backwards.